Let me guess. You're tired of corporate America. You want to quit your job and become your own boss. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but being your own boss is not all it's cracked up to be. Stick around and I'll tell you more. Hey everybody, it's Brian from Life After Layoff, and today I want to talk about the golden standard of employment, being your own boss, and why it might not be all you think it is. But before we get into that, if you're interested in learning how to reclaim control and take back ownership, kind of like I did, make sure you sign up for my free newsletter. In it, I share concise, actionable tips on how to approach your job search and your career with more conviction and power. Keep in mind, it's absolutely free and it's loaded with value, so make sure you sign up below. All right, so let's talk about being your own boss. I have some notes over here that I'm going to refer to, so if you see me darting back and forth, that's what I'm doing. I just don't want to freaking edit a long-ass video, be perfectly honest with you. Now, I realize some of my content is relatively dark, and it's probably the nature of the channel, and honestly, the nature of the employment situation in general. We have a lot of layoffs, and I talk about the ugly side of employment, and from the average job seeker's perspective, how they can navigate it more effectively. That's the whole purpose of the channel, is to give you an insider's look into how companies operate, how companies work, so that you can use that to your advantage and hopefully gain an advantage in the workplace. And if you want a little bit more of a balanced approach, make sure you follow me on LinkedIn and potentially even TikTok, because I do have different content there. But when I post videos about employers behaving badly, about layoffs, or maybe some red flags that you should be aware of, inevitably, people come onto the comment section and they start saying that, well, I'm going to be my own boss, or I'm so glad I became my own boss, or I'm going to become my own boss. And to be perfectly honest with you, I felt the exact same way myself. Back in 2020, I got tired of getting laid off. And so I decided to take the ownership of my career and decided to form a business. And it started off as a side hustle, and gradually over time it built and built and built. And I did achieve what I call escape velocity. I ended up leaving the workforce officially, so I'm no longer actively recruiting as of about a year now, and I'm doing this full time as a job now. And so I do have a unique perspective from both sides of the fence. I've been on the employee side, I've been on the employer side, and now I've been on the being my own boss side. And here's the deal. After 4 years of doing this, being your own boss is not all that it's cracked up to be. I think people have a very big misconception. They think that there's just some land of milk and honey, that I'm gonna ride off into the sunset, I'm gonna flick everybody off, and I'm gonna tell everybody to go pound sand as I go off and run my own business. And the reality is that I would say maybe 95, maybe even higher, maybe 98% of people are not cut out for being their own boss. And there's a lot of reasons why I feel this way. I don't think that people truly have an understanding of what it actually takes to get a successful business off the ground. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about running side hustle after side hustle, so you're off delivering for Uber Eats and you're kind of scraping together money. I'm talking about actually having a successful business where you make a reasonable income, hopefully more than you did in your corporate job, and there's not a sense of stress and worry about the financial thing. You're not bootstrapping it together. To actually be in a successful business requires an immense amount of work. And it's probably something I knew that it would require the amount of work that it did, because I launched other businesses in the past and was not successful. I had a commercial photography business, a couple of blogs, a couple of social media influencing businesses. Throughout my career, my life, I've been kind of a serial entrepreneur. So I had a good understanding of what it would actually take, or should say I had a decent understanding of what it should take. But until you're actually in the trenches trying to do this thing and trying to get things off the ground, trying to achieve escape velocity, it is very difficult to get things going. Now, I'm not discouraging people from starting their own business. I'm the first proponent of taking control, and that's the ultimate taking control of your career, is becoming your own boss. But the reality of it, the kind of glamour of it, is a lot more appealing than once you get behind the scenes and see all that kind of stuff that you have to do in order to be successful. Because I think if people really understood it, you probably wouldn't be so quick to jump into that end of the pool. Because here's the thing. Working for yourself requires an extreme discipline. You have to work a ton of hours, and it's not for the faint of heart. When I launched a Life After Layoff, I ended up doing it while I was laid off. So I took advantage of my time. I didn't have a full-time job, so I'd spend some time doing my job search because I knew I had to go back to work. But I was spending a lot of my time, spending 12 plus hours working on my business. And my wife used to come in and say, I thought I'd see more of you when you got laid off because you don't have a job. But she goes, I actually see less of you. And it was because I was like feverishly working on this thing every single day, including weekends and nights. And sometimes I would log in after everybody went to bed, and I would come back down and do even another hour or two just to finish up this thing that I was working on. I just was so hyper focused. You have to have the passion in order to do it, because if you don't have the inner burning drive to do it, a lot of people will start off strong. They'll do a couple of months, everything's kind of going. But then when they start to realize that there's not an immediate result, a lot of people will give up. And that's where the discipline becomes so important. It's kind of like what separates the wheat from the chaff. The people who have the discipline in order to do that, to put in 12 hours, and I'm talking about like, even when I went back to work, I eventually found another job. So I was working a full-time job, and I was still juggling this business because I had already put a lot of effort into it. It was already starting to percolate a little bit, but I was trying to run a business while I was working full-time. And keeping in mind, I have a wife, I have a young family, including little kids. Like at that time, when I launched, I had a 6-month-old baby, basically, and we were planning to expand our family. So, I had a lot of time commitments to try to squeeze into a 24-hour day period, and I just wanted it so badly that I was willing to do it. It was a sacrifice that I was willing to take, and it was hard, and it still is. It's still hard, but it was really hard in the beginning. And this was not just a few months of doing this. This was like couple of years of doing this. And so it's like that marathon trying to keep pace with it. So it does require extreme discipline. And I think that people underestimate the amount of discipline that it takes to be able to carve your day out. At the end of the day, you just have to want it badly enough. And I think that that's why most people who try businesses and fail, that's probably the number one reason. It's not dealing with startup costs or anything. I actually had no startup, but very minimal startup costs. It was about the discipline for me. That was the hardest thing. The second thing is you're always worrying. And it doesn't matter how successful you are. Like let's just say last month, I had a record month for me. I had the best month ever. And I automatically think next month it's going to be terrible. It's going to be terrible. I need to sweat it. What happens if business falls off the cliff and now I don't have any income coming in? No matter how successful you are, and I've heard this from people who are making millions of dollars. I'm not making millions of dollars, but people who are making millions of dollars always say the same thing. You're never not worrying about the next paycheck, about the next month. It's always in the back of your mind, like, I have to keep this thing going. I have to keep this thing going. And that honestly can lead to some pretty significant burnout if you're not careful, because that is a prevailing thought with me. Every single month I'm thinking I've got to keep hustling. I've got to keep doing it. And that's just what it takes. That's like I guess that's the entrepreneurial mindset. The next thing is that there is no rule book for how to do this thing. Now, there are people who have some training courses. You could probably go off to Barnes & Noble and buy a book. But when you actually start to get into the thick of things and you start to define what your business is, in general, there's not a rule book to follow. There's nobody there telling you step by step what you should be doing, how to get to launch a business. And maybe I guess if you buy like a franchise or something like that, there's somebody doing that, but you're paying a lot of money to do that. But in general, there's no rule book. There's no person telling you, okay, next you can do this, next you got to do that. You kind of have to figure it out yourself. And taking that a step further, you have to wear a lot of different hats. For me, I knew that I wanted to do a career coaching type of business to help people get jobs, to get back into the workplace as quickly as they can, try to share a lot of my recruiting. I like to call it my vast recruiting knowledge and my experience in human resources, seeing people moving through organizations and all this stuff. But the reality is that I spend very little of my time actually doing that. I'm spending most of my time writing. I'm spending it being a webmaster. I'm spending it trying to do SEO, which I stink at. I don't know much about SEO. I'm spending my time doing video editing. Video editing is a major time commitment, and it's a major time suck. And honestly, sometimes it's hard, like, to keep motivated to keep that going. But I do a lot of video editing. I'm also in the middle of tax time. If you have for me, I have an LLC, so I've got to deal with corporate taxes, and then I've got to also deal with my personal taxes. So that's kind of all happening at the same time. I have to do my own bookkeeping. I have to do all of my basically I'm my own IT guy. So if something doesn't work, I have to go and troubleshoot it. I'm spending time on web forums trying to figure out and troubleshoot. I am trying to figure out email servers, and I'm also a marketer. So I'm over trying to get a newsletter going and sending the marketing component out there. I'm also building courses. So I'm basically like all of these hats that you wear that people don't realize. You have to have all of these skills, and it can be pretty overwhelming, especially if you don't have any experience doing this stuff. Like, creating like a logo, for example, or creating a website. And let's face it, most businesses today require a website, logo. If you don't know how to do some of this stuff, you're going to be paying a lot of money to people to do this stuff for you. And at some point, that's where it can be very expensive. For me, I bootstrapped, spent hardly any money, but I learned all the skills that I needed to. But it's like nobody telling you what to do, and you have to figure it out as you go. And you make mistakes, and you try to backpedal, and you say, okay, that didn't work. That was a waste of time. Wish I would have done it this other way instead. And that's kind of how things have progressed in this business. But you have no rule book, and you're wearing multiple hats. So in addition to that, the whole idea of like work-life balance, it comes into play. And I kind of touched on, how many hours I've been working. But when you go into business for yourself, you think that you've got all of this time, you're going to be able to take all the time off. Now, the nice thing is I can take the time off if I need to, but my work-life balance probably isn't I would say it's not appreciably better. Now, sometimes I'm not a night owl. I'm not a morning person. I'm a night owl. But I maybe start a little later than I should, to be perfectly honest with you. But I still work 10 plus hours a day. Sometimes, right now I'm actually recording this video at almost 11 o'clock at night, which is about par for the course. Usually I record at night. So I am not spending time with my wife tonight. Before you say anything, I do spend a lot of time with her. We do carve out time, and I make sure that I do spend time with my kids and my wife. But tonight I am recording. But the thing about work-life balance is it's not necessarily better if you're your own boss. Many of you who are entrepreneurs know you're answering phones at night, you're checking emails when you probably shouldn't be. I've had to start to define some boundaries. And because I was just burning myself out, trying to answer every single email that came in. And I appreciate all the emails that people send me and all the people who want to talk and have kind of informal conversations with me. The amount that I get is just so overwhelming that I was trying to keep up with them, and I was burning myself out. And my wife told me, it's like, if you don't do something different, this thing's going to cave in on itself, because you're not going to be able to sustain it. So I've had to start making boundaries in that regard, and that's been a hard lesson for me to learn, is making boundaries, starting to learn to say no, because there has to be some self-preservation. I have to preserve my family life, obviously, first and foremost, but I also have to preserve my ability to continue to do this job. I call it a job, but like to continue to do this business in a way, because my family relies on me, and you have to learn how to set boundaries. And there's not somebody there kind of defining. You don't have somebody in customer service that you can just send things over to, or you don't have somebody in the IT department. It's like, again, you're like wearing all these caps. So work-life balance isn't necessarily better being my own boss. Then, the whole thing of, if I don't work, I'm not getting paid. So if I don't work hard and I don't do the work, like if I don't make these videos, if I don't post on LinkedIn, if I don't make Twitter posts. By the way, if you're on Twitter, I just started a Twitter, and I haven't really been pushing it super duper hard, but I'm feeling super lame over there. I've got 280,000 subscribers here. Got a bunch on LinkedIn and TikTok. I've got 100 people on Twitter. I feel like totally lame. If you're on Twitter and you want to follow along, I don't spam post or anything like that, but love a follow there if you want to help me out and make me feel a little less lonely. And again, I'm doing all of this because I have the mindset of, if I don't do it, I'm not going to get paid. Now, I've been fortunate enough to set up a business model that I can get paid even when I'm not working. There's residuals, like YouTube will pay residuals for people who watch my channel. So I'm getting views on videos I made even 4 years ago, and still getting revenue from them. Courses sell themselves and things like that. So there is some revenue coming in, but in a lot of cases, if I'm not, it's like feeding the proverbial beast. It's like you just have to constantly be shoving the coal into the fire, because you have to keep on feeding it. And that grind can get to be very difficult, because it's there's never ending. And the nature of human nature is that people want more and more and more. And, they'll send me really long emails with, the situations that they're in. and like I feel for people. Like I have a high degree of empathy for the things that people are going through, but it's like balancing the work and the life, and but also keeping the beast going. It's like I have to prioritize and make sure that I'm doing the right things for my business. But the thing with a corporate job is you get paid no matter what. You don't have to worry about whether or not you're showing up. If you're on vacation, you're getting paid. If you take some extra time off, you're getting paid. Every 2 weeks a paycheck comes in. You know how much it is. There's no fluctuation. With the nature of being an entrepreneur is some weeks are great, some weeks are not so great. It's just kind of like this, and you don't know when your next paycheck's coming. But with working for an employer, you know exactly when the paycheck's coming. And I don't want to discount the importance of that. For most people, that is a really powerful thing. And that's, there's talk about like how that's like the dangling carrot in front of you. And let's face it, it is. But there's some very real value in having a steady paycheck every 2 weeks that comes in, because you can predict. Banks like people that have steady paychecks, steady income that they can predict if they're determining who they're going to give a loan to. It's a lot harder to go into a bank and try to get a loan when you're an entrepreneur, because I can't necessarily prove my monthly income. Sometimes it's here, sometimes here, sometimes it's here, sometimes it's here. And that's just the nature of the beast. So giving up the steady paycheck is definitely something to take into consideration. And taking that a step further, the benefits. I also don't have any benefits. So I have to go out to the open marketplace. And if you think your benefits at your company, the crappy benefits that you have to pay for are bad, try going on the open market and buying your own benefits, because man, it is like a very humbling experience to go in and pay like $1,300 a month for insurance that's it's like basically one step above catastrophic. It's insurance you never heard of before. No carrier, no company carries the plans that we qualify or can afford, and the level of coverage, your deductibles are like $16,000 to $20,000. They don't cover anything. It's absolutely awful. So you have no benefits. In addition to that, there's no 401k, there's no paid time off, and not to mention you also have to pay your own taxes. A lot of you may not realize that on your paycheck, you pay a certain amount of taxes, your FICA, your Social Security, like all of that stuff. The employer is also matching that same time. There's an employment tax that they're paying. They're matching the same amount of tax that you're paying. So it's like double that's going to the government. Well, guess what? When you're an employee, when you're work for yourself, you're your own boss, or you're the employee of your own company. You have to pay that other side. So you have to pay. It's like take 15.5% just off the top of your income before anything else gets touched. 15.5% goes to self-employment, and then you get taxed at your regular tax rate. So you have to factor that in. So even if you think you're making on your side hustle or your business the same amount of money, your billable, your I guess your gross income, you need to make 15.5% above that in order to truly be just equal. And then you got to factor in the benefits and all that stuff. And so that was a really tough one. That's a tough lesson to learn for me, is that there's that self-employment tax and then the benefits and all that stuff. I don't think people realize how much they take that for granted, that is such a big benefit. And it's one of the dangling carrots that employers use. Now, before you say it sounds like being your own boss is the worst thing ever, I actually want to stop you there and say, being my own boss is the best thing I've ever done. I would never trade it to go back to being a corporate employee again. I absolutely love what I do. And because I've worked such a long career grinding out, for working for the man, that I think I can appreciate what I have so much more than somebody that's not really gone through that grind. They maybe only gone through, it's not to discount somebody's experience after only a few years, but I've gone through a long period of time where I tried starting businesses and didn't have enough of that discipline, and I failed, and then had to go back to the workplace again, and then kind of went through a cycle or two, and go through layoffs and all this stuff, and going back to work and kind of buying into the dangling carrot of the salary and the benefits and all that stuff. That it did take a while for me to really truly understand what I had in front of me. And in 2020, I knew that going in, that I was ready to finally try this for real this time. And that's what I ended up doing. And the reason why I wouldn't trade it is because I don't have a boss that I have to report to. I don't have performance appraisals. I will never get laid off. I will never get fired. I'll never be called into a room and coached and terminated and all that stuff. Okay, well, I should correct, my wife will coach me occasionally. But I don't have any of those things that a traditional employee would have as far as the work arrangement is concerned. And same thing goes with time off. Even though I don't have a prescribed paid time off program, I'm not under a certain policy, I can take as much time as I want off. Again, I just always have to worry about, have I covered my desk? Do I have enough content batched? Can I log in for an hour or two a day just to make sure things are afloat? Those are all the things that that I worry about. But the reality is I can take as much time off as I want. I can work on a beach. I don't have some boss calling me back into an office saying we can't have you working remote anymore. I make the rules, and as a result, I can enjoy those benefits. Also, as far as compensation is concerned, most people get dangled the 2 and 3% every year. You're lucky to get most people aren't keeping pace with the cost of living. They give you 2 and 3% raises, and that's basically all it is. And if you get a promotion, maybe you get a 10% bump, but in general, you're just getting these small little incremental raises. I can control when I give myself a raise. I pay myself a salary, and if I want to give myself a 50% raise, 100% raise for the year or for a month or for a paycheck, if I want to, I just call my accountant up and I say, hey, I want to pay myself this amount, and he'll increase my paycheck. And the next paycheck comes in, I got an increase, and I call him back up and say, okay, I'm good. Now bring it back down again. And so that's a really nice benefit to have. But the most important thing is the quality of life that I now enjoy, and the sense of freedom that I have absolutely reclaimed control in the most definable, most tangible way that you can. I have escaped the rat race. I have been able to achieve everything that I have really wanted to when I first set out to do this. Now I've got a lot of other things that I want to work on to achieve, but I've achieved what I've set out to originally. And the feeling I get having achieved that is probably my proudest moment in my career. So the moral of the story here is that being your own boss is not all it's cracked up to be, but it's the best thing I've ever done. And if you're really interested in doing it yourself, there are ways to do it and avoid some of those mistakes. I actually coach people on these. So if you are somebody that's saying, gosh, I'm ready to make those commitments, I'm ready to do the hard work, I just don't know what to do or how to do it, I actually do some coaching on that. So you can hit me up through my website. And I actually do have plans to teach people. I've got a training course that I'm going to be working on. I'm backed up on some training courses right now, but I do have some plans to launch a course on how exactly to do this, how to kind of leave corporate America behind. So stay tuned if you're interested in that. Anyway, this was a long rambling video. I appreciate you watching. If you have any interest in careers and leaving the workplace and all this stuff, that's kind of just a little bit of my story. But appreciate you watching, and we'll see you on the next one.